Hey guys, it's Lotus and welcome back to another video. Today, we're going to continue on with our read-along of Urha. Let's jump right into it. Chapter 56. This venerable one is busy wrapping dumplings. To be asked such a question, Moran's face was one of bewilderment. Do I miss him? In spite of the deep, unforgettable resentment from his previous life, Chuaning had never wronged him in this one. Instead, he'd shielded him over and over from danger, and he was the one who was covered head to toe in injuries and bruised black and blue for him instead. After a long time, he finally responded, all of these times that he's been injured, it was all because of me. Seeing the expression on his face, Chuaning felt a twinge of warmth in his heart. He wanted to say something back to Moran, but stopped after hearing what he said next. He's done too much for me, and I can only hope to help him recover a little bit quicker. I don't want to owe him too much. That flicker of warmth, his heart seems to have died. Completely unmoving, frozen over. Chuaning stood still for a little while, feeling as though he was extremely laughable. Moran already told him that the only thing between them was the relationship between master and disciple. It was his own fault that his head became dizzy with excitement at the slightest bit of hope, flying like a moth into a blazing fire, and being scorched into ashes. He couldn't blame anyone else. Chuaning smiled. It was probably an ugly, dejected smile. You're overthinking it. You are his disciple, so there's no such thing as owing him debts. Everything he does willingly. Moran's eyes turned to him. And you're still so small, but you're always turning your nose up, giving cheek and imitating how adults speak, he said, laughing brightly, and rubbed Shasini's head. Chuaning's head was patted for a while. He was still laughing at first, but after a while his eyes slowly started to fill up with tears. And, facing the dazzlingly bright space in front of him, he said softly, Moran, I don't want to play with you anymore. Let go. Moran's skull was several inches too thick, so he didn't notice any changes in his Shidi's expression. Besides that, he had gotten so used to joking around and yelling with Shasini that he didn't hesitate to pinch the child's soft, baby-smooth cheeks. Moran's lips quirked up softly, and he made a funny face. Why is little Shidi mad this time? Chuaning stared at the child reflected in the other's eyes, with such an ugly smile on his pinched face, like a pathetic, funny-looking monster. Let go! Moran didn't notice, and continued teasing him just as he did before. Okay, don't be mad. I won't say that you're pretending to be an adult, Come here, let's make up. Call me Suga. Let go of me. Be good, call me Suga, and I'll buy you osmanthus cake to eat in a bit. Chuaning closed his eyes, eyelashes trembling slightly, and finally spoke, his voice hoarse. Moran, I'm not kidding around. I really don't want to play with you anymore. Can you let go of me? Let go, okay? His slender eyebrows knitted together, and tears didn't trickle out from his eyes because they were tightly shut. However, he spoke in a voice choked with sobs. Moran, it hurts. It hurt too much to hold one person in his heart, so he hid him carefully in the very depths of his heart. It was fine if that person didn't like him, as long as he could think about that person quietly, protect that person silently. It was fine if he couldn't have that person. All of it was fine. But that person's warmth and tenderness were given only to others, and the only things offered to him were barbs and thorns. He held him in his heart, and whenever that person moved, his heart would start bleeding. Day after day, new wounds would appear before the old ones had even healed over. It was then that Chuaning knew that even if he wasn't vibing to obtain this person's affections, every single moment that he held him in his heart would hurt him to his core. He didn't know how long he'd be able to bear this kind of pain, didn't know when he'd break down from it completely. Moran finally noticed that something was off, and frantically let go. He touched the other's red-tinged cheeks, at a complete loss as to what to do. Chuaning suddenly thought that being in the body of a child wasn't a bad thing. At least, this way, he could say so if it hurt without restraint, could show a little bit of his vulnerable side. At least, this way, he would look toward him with concern. Oh, poor Shizun. Oh, man. This was something that he would have never even dared to think about before. In the blink of an eye, it was already New Year's Eve. This was the liveliest time of year on Shisheng Peak. All of the disciples were busy putting up red paper talismans and sweeping snowdrifts. The head chef of Mengpo Hall was busy from dawn till dusk, preparing delicacies for the end-of-year feast. Also, all of the elders prepared spells and charms that they specialized in to add to the festivities to help welcome the new year. For example, Tanlang Elder transformed a pool of fresh spring water into fragrant wine, and Xuanji Elder released the 3,000 firelight mice that he'd been raising, allowing them to scatter around the sect to keep watch wherever they were, bringing everyone a little bit of warmth and respite from the cold. Lu Sun Elder enchanted the snowmen everyone made to run around to the peak and yell, "Happy New Year!" at anyone they ran into. No one expected Yu Heng Elder to do anything. As a matter of fact, he was still in seclusion. He'd been gone for a long time and hadn't appeared in front of anybody since the very start. Xue Meng stood by the window, his face tilted upwards, looking at the petals of haitang blossoms fluttering from the skies, and spoke as though preoccupied with something. "We'll be gone after today. It seems we won't be able to see him before we leave after all. I wonder what Shizun's doing right now." "He's definitely cultivating," Moran said through a mouthful of apple. "Speaking of which, all of the elders are supposed to put on a performance tonight. It sucks that Shizun isn't here. If he was, he'd have to perform too. I wonder what he could even do." Moran laughed before continuing. "Maybe he'd put on a display of how to get angry, eh?" Xue Meng glared at him. "How about a performance of whipping Mo Wei Yu to death?" It was the new year, so Moran didn't get angry at Xue Meng's harsh joke. He suddenly thought of something and asked, "Oh yeah, have you seen the little Shidi today?" "You mean Sha Sini?" Xue Meng replied. "I haven't seen him, but in any case, he's Xuanji's elder's disciple. Xuanji is already being gracious to not mind him hanging out with us every day. But if he kept sticking around us even during the New Year festivities, his Shizun might really lose his mind." Moran laughed. "I guess." The rays of the setting sun turned into evening above Red Lotus Pavilion. Chuaning held a pill in his hand, looking it over carefully. Xue Zhenyong was sitting across from him and pouring himself a cup of tea, since Chuaning didn't invite him to have some. He also ate a crispy pastry from the plate. Etiquette be damned. Chuaning glared at him, but Xue Zhenyong kept chewing obliviously. Yu Heng, aren't you done looking at it yet? Tanlang can be pretty harsh with his words, but his intentions aren't bad at all. It's not like he'd actually harm you." "What are you saying, sect leader?" Chuaning replied lightly. "I was just thinking that since Tanlang Elder already went through the trouble to concoct a pill that would allow me to regain my adult form for one day, then why doesn't he just extract a couple more of them? That way, I can just take one when the need arises." "Aiya, if only it was that easy," Xue Zhenyong said. "The raw materials that go into making this medicine are rare beyond measure, and Tanlang's already out of materials after refining 3 of them. It's not a long-term plan." "I see," Chuaning replied, deep in thought. "So that's how it is. Please give him my thanks." "Haha!" Xue Zhenyong waved his hand. "You two are actually pretty similar, you know. Curt with your words, but not bad at heart." Chuaning shot a glare over at him, but didn't say anything. He poured himself a cup of tea and swallowed the medicine that would allow him to return to his original form. Xue Zhenyong was just about to eat another pastry when Chuaning stopped his hand. "What?" the sect leader said unhappily. Chuaning spoke. "Mine." Xue Zhenyong, ... Oh, I like Chuaning exerting dominance. When night fell on Shisheng Peak, all of the disciples filtered into Mengpo Hall, one after the other. Each elder brought their disciples and sat down together to knead dough and make dumplings. Both the snowmen and the firelight mice threaded through the throngs of people, passing them jars of salt, red pepper powder, saucers of chopped scallions, and other miscellaneous things. Every table was bustling with excitement and chattering laughter. Yu Heng Elder's table was the only exception. The disciples were all here, but the master was absent. Xue Meng looked around him for a bit, sighing. "I miss Shizun." Shimei replied warmly. "Didn't Shizun send us a letter a few days ago? telling us to enjoy the festivities and to work hard on our cultivation at the Peach Blossom Springs, and that he'll come see us as soon as he comes out of seclusion? He did say that, but just when will he come out of seclusion? Shuemeng sighed sorrowfully, his eyes wandering listlessly past the gates, when he suddenly sat up straight, eyes opened wide like a cat and staring out the gates. Shuemeng's face paled and then colored, flushed a dizzying shade of red, and his eyes shone brightly. He was so excited that he couldn't even speak properly. That's... Moran thought that one of the rare spiritual beasts that Xuanji Elder raised had escaped to liven things up a bit, and thought that Shuemeng was surprised because he was inexperienced and overreacting. He laughed. That's what? Look at you. It's like you saw an immortal or something. What's there to be so sure? He turned around, still grinning gleefully, and casually looked up, and couldn't finish the rest of his sentence. Standing in the snowy dusk outside the door was Chuaning, dressed in white robes with a vividly red cape. He turned elegantly to the side to put away his umbrella and shake off the dusting of snow. Then his eyelashes flicked up to reveal a pair of bright, slender phoenix eyes underneath, a mild glance sweeping over them. With just this one glance, by the time Moran came back to his senses, his heart was already beating fast and his palms were covered in sweat, and even his breathing had slowed down involuntarily. The chatter at Mengpo Hall gradually quieted down. Usually, whenever Chuaning appeared in Mengpo Hall, the disciples didn't dare to cause a ruckus. Even more so now, to suddenly appear on New Year's Eve after having been in seclusion for such a long time. The snowflakes on him seemed to make his face even fairer and more beautiful, and made his eyebrows seem darker and more refined. Moran stood up murmuring, "Shizun!" Shuemeng bounded up and sprinted with kitten-like excitement towards Chuaning, yelling, "Shizun!" while running into Chuaning's arms. Chuaning's clothes were thoroughly chilled from the bitter cold outside, but Shuemeng wore an expression like he was holding peach blossoms from early spring, or a coal fire from late summer, endlessly warm. Shuemeng began to shout noisily, not stopping to take a breath. "Shizun, you finally come out! I thought that we wouldn't be able to see you before leaving, but you love us after all! Shizun! Shizun!" Shimei also came over and bowed respectfully, his face beaming with delight. "Congratulations to Shizun for coming out of seclusion!" Chuaning patted Shuemeng's head and nodded in Shimei's direction. "This master has arrived slightly late, but let's go greet the new year together." He sat down at the feast, with Shuemeng at his side and Moran across from him. With Chuaning's arrival, and after the initial hubbub and excitement died down, the three disciples fell into their usual habits, sitting upright and still like their Shizun. Their table was weirdly silent. There was flour, ground meat, eggs, and many other types of ingredients on the table, along with a brand new copper coin. Moran was the one with the best cooking skills in their group. Thus, everyone decided that he'd be the one to give instructions. "Well, I guess I'll take charge then," Moran replied, laughing. "Do you guys know how to roll dough?" Nobody uttered a word. "Okay, I'll roll out the wrappers then," Moran said. "Shumei, you make the best wontons, and dumpling filling isn't all that different, so why don't you make the filling?" Shumei hesitated for a while before saying, There's some difference after all. I'm afraid that I might not be able to do it properly." Chuaning replied lightly, "It's fine as long as it's edible. Don't worry about it." Shumei smiled. "Okay then." "Shuemeng, you can just pass the water or help roll our sleeves up or something. Just don't get in the way." Shuemeng, ... "Do you really think I'm that useless?" "As for Shizun," Moran grinned, "would Shizun like to sit by the side and have a nice cup of tea?" Chuaning replied coldly, "I'll wrap the dumplings." "Ah?" Moran exclaimed, startled, thinking that he might have gone violently deaf in both ears. "What did you want to do?" "I said I'll wrap the dumplings." Moran, ... Moran suddenly thought that he would have much rather gone violently deaf in both ears after all. Why? What's wrong with Shizun wanting to wrap dumplings? I mean, it's not like he's cooking, he's just wrapping them, right? Anyway, that's the end of the chapter. Let's check out author's notes. There are some little baobes with questions about the story's background setting. Although bits and pieces have already appeared in the book and more will be written in the future, There is yet to be a detailed summary after all. World expositions tend to be less interesting. I'm afraid of everybody falling asleep if I fed it to you all at once, ha ha ha. So today's author's notes will contain a segment of the setting. Take a look if it interests you. First is about upper and lower cultivation world. The upper in upper cultivation means that rising of pure air. Coastal area on the map, near Kunlun Sky Pond. These places are all upper cultivation world. The lower in lower cultivation indicates the sinking of tainted air, overflowing with spirits and monsters, with the necropolis Fengdu as center, most located in Sichuan and Guizhou region. Upper cultivation world has an abundance of cultivation energy, suitable for cultivation practice. Thus, there are 9 large sects in the upper cultivation world, while lower cultivation world only has Shisheng Peak. In regards to cultivation, there is no clear differentiation of ranking such as Golden Core, Foundation, Passing Trials, or Grand Master. After the spiritual core's awakening, there is only continuous strengthening of one's own cultivation ability. There is no complex grading system. Cultivators practice to achieve goals, such as gaining exceptional spiritual powers, to become the top amongst peers. But of course, there are ones like Shizun, who want to use their powers to do good deeds. People with tremendous amounts of power can live up to 100 years, maintain youthful appearance, and become a celestial being upon their death. However, ones who have been able to ascend while they are still alive can be counted with one hand. Dying of old age, then reincarnate into the next life tend to be the end result for the majority of cultivators. Ooh, that's some nice background information. Okay, so to recap chapter 56, Moran is thinking about Shizun and he's talking to Sha Sini, and Sha Sini is still under the impression that Moran really doesn't like Chuaning and that he's only being quote-unquote nice to him to pay him back for being his master. So Chuaning is really depressed and he kind of stops hanging out with them for a little bit. And then New Year's celebrations comes rolling around and Moran, Xuemeng, Shimei, they haven't seen Sha Sini for a while. And while at the same time, Sha Sini has finally been given a pill by Tanlang Elder that would help turn him back into his adult form for a little while. I don't know how many hours? Did they say for about a day? So he takes the pill and he shows up as their Shizun to spend the New Year's with them. So that's really sweet of him because there's only 3 pills that Tanlang Elder could create. And so he would really want to save those pills for when there's a big emergency, but he already took one just to spend time with his beloved disciples. So he only has 2 left. He's going to have to conserve those when he goes to the bird tribe, the feathered tribe, in case a situation or emergency breaks out. So hopefully the 2 pills that he has will be enough. Let's continue on to chapter 57. Yeah. Okay. Chapter 57. This venerable one listens to you play the guqin once again. Unexpectedly, although Chuaning's dumpling wrapping technique was clumsy, the finished product actually wasn't bad. The dumplings made by those long fingers of his were adorably round, lining up neatly on the table. All 3 disciples were dumbstruck. Shizun actually knows how to make dumplings? Am I dreaming right now? Wow, he's really good at it too. Wow. Of course, their hushed mutterings didn't escape Chuaning's ears. Chuaning pressed his lips together, eyelashes fluttering imperceptibly, and even though he was expressionless as always, the tips of his ears grew a little bit pink. Xuemeng couldn't resist asking, Shizun, I was about to revert to my old pronunciation. Shizun, is this your first time making dumplings? Then how are you making them so nice looking? It's not so different from making golems, just folding a few creases, there's nothing to it. Moran watched him from across the wooden table, gradually becoming lost in thought. The only time he had ever seen Chuaning cook in the last life was after Shimei's passing. That day, he had gone to the kitchen and slowly made the wontons that were Shimei's specialty. But before they could make it into the pot, they were struck to the ground by a Moran who had lost all sense, the snowy wontons rolling all over the floor. Moran had no recollection at all of whether those wontons were round or flat, well-made or deformed. The only thing he remembered was the look on Chuaning's face, the way he had stared at him without a word, with bits of flour still on his face, looking strangely unfamiliar, somewhat at a loss, even a bit dumb. Moran had thought that he would get angry, but Chuaning had said nothing in the end, only bending over, and, with his head lowered, quietly picked up the dirty wontons one by one, gathered them up together, and then tossed them in the trash. Just what was going through Chuaning's mind at that time? Moran didn't know. He had never thought about it, didn't want to think about it, and, truthfully, didn't dare think about it. The dumplings were all done being wrapped, and the little snowmen carried them away to the kitchen to be boiled. In accordance with tradition, Chuaning put a copper coin into one of them. Whoever gets it would have good luck. That sounds like a choking hazard, though. How big is this coin? It wasn't long before the snowmen brought back cooked dumplings, complete with spicy and sour dipping sauce in the wooden tray. Shuemeng said, "Shizun, please go ahead first." Chuaning did not decline. He picked up a dumpling with his chopsticks and put it in his bowl, but did not eat it, instead picking up 3 more and giving them to Shuemeng, Moran, and Shimei. "Happy New Year," Chuaning said mildly. The disciples were taken aback for a moment before they all broke into smiles. "Shizun, Happy New Year!" As it happens, Moran bit into the copper coin with a crack on the very first dumpling. He was caught totally off guard and nearly broke a tooth on it. As he deserves. As he should. Looking at the grimace on his face, Shimei laughed. "Aran is sure to have good luck this year." Shuemeng, lucky bastard. Moran, teary-eyed. Shizun, aren't you a little too good at picking dumplings? I died on the very first one. Chuaning, speak properly. Moran, I bit my tongue. Chuaning, ... Moran rubbed his cheek and took a sip of the tea Shimei offered before the pain finally subsided a little, and he immediately began joking around. Haha, could it be that Shizun memorized which dumpling had the copper coin and deliberately gave it to me? You wish, Chuaning said coldly, then lowered his head and started eating. Moran wasn't sure if he was seeing things, but under the warm candlelight, Chuaning's face seemed a little red. Oh, did he really pick and give Moran the one with the copper coin? After the dumplings, a sumptuous dinner prepared by the head chef was brought out, platefuls of meat and fish covering the entire table. Mengpo Hall grew even livelier. From the seat of honor, Shui Zhengyang and Madame Wang directed the little snowmen to deliver red packets to every table. A little snowman bumped insistently against Chuaning's knee, the stones it has for eyes rolling around as it stared at him. Chuaning blinked. Even I get one? He accepted the red packet and opened it to find a handful of pricey golden leaves. A little lost for words, he looked up at Shui Zhengyang, only to see the carefree man grinning back at himself before raising the cup of wine in his hand toward him in a toast. Oh, he gave him a red packet because he has a Shasini form, so the red packet is for Shasini. How silly. But then again, Shui Zhengyang was really... Chuaning stared at him for a while and couldn't help the faint smile that curved the corners of his lips. He raised his own cup in return toward the sect leader and downed it in one gulp. Chuaning divided the golden leaves amongst his disciples. 3 rounds of drinks later, accompanied by non-stop performances on the stage, the atmosphere at the table finally grew lively as well. Mostly due to the fact that it seems the 3 brats have grown less afraid of him. As for Chuaning, he's always been able to hold his alcohol. Shizun, let me read your palm. Shuemeng was the first to get all tipsy. Wait, are they old enough to be drinking wine? They're all teenagers, right? I wonder what the age requirement is. Shuemeng was the first to get all tipsy. He grabbed Chuaning's hand and held it in front of his eyes to carefully examine. If not for the 3 cups of wine in his system, he never would have dared to be this bold. Your lifeline is long but disjointed, which means your health isn't too good. Shuemeng mumbled. You get sick easily. Moran laughed. That's pretty accurate. Chuaning shot him a glare. A long and slender ring finger. Shizun has good fortune with money. 3 lines from a common point. The love line branches off at its tip to merge down into the wisdom line. Typically indicates a willingness to sacrifice for love. Shuemeng stared at it blankly for a while, before whipping his head up to ask, Is that true? Face ashen, Chuaning hissed between gritted teeth. Shui Ziming, are you tired of being alive? Shui Meng was about to expose him. But Shui Meng, too drunk to detect the mortal danger he was in, just grinned sincerely and kept right on looking, muttering, "Ah, and the love line forms an island shape, right beneath the ring finger at that. Shizun, your taste in people is dreadful. Absolutely abysmal." Well, he's not wrong. Shui Meng is not wrong. Chuaning had had enough. He ripped his hand away and brushed his sleeve down to leave. Moran was about to die of laughter, doubled over holding his stomach and cackling loudly, when he suddenly caught Chuaning's icy, murderous gaze and forcibly swallowed his laughter, his ribs aching with the effort. Chuaning said angrily, "What are you laughing about? What's so funny?" He was just about to storm off in a rage when Shui Meng grabbed his sleeve. Immediately after, all the laughter disappeared from Moran's face as Shui Meng pulled Chuaning down in a drunken daze and burrowed into his arms, with his forehead pressed against the folds of his Shizun's robes and his arms wrapped around his waist, nuzzling affectionately. Oh, drunk Shui Meng is so cute. He's like a little puppy or a little kitten. He's like cuddling with Shizun. That's really cute. He's the only one of the 3 disciples that would openly hug Shizun, even if Shizun is not really receptive to it. Like, Moran doesn't dare right now because he feels that Chuaning is his mortal enemy currently, so he wouldn't actively go and hug Shizun. But, and of course Shimei also, he's too proper to go and give his Shizun a hug. But Shui Meng has constantly, again and again, hugged Chuaning, and you know what? What a good boy. What a really good boy. No wonder he's Chuaning's favorite disciple. Shizun, came the teenager's soft, velvety voice, complete with a tinge of acting cute. Don't go. Come, have another round. Chuaning looked like he was going to choke. Shui Ziming, what do you think you're doing? Let go. But right at that moment, the little snowmen from the stage suddenly all clacked over. It turns out that Tanlang Elder's sword dance performance was over, and it was now Chuaning's turn to put on a show. Unfortunately, this also meant that all the eyes in the hall turned collectively toward Chuaning, just in time to see a drunken Shui Meng clinging to Yu Heng Elder's waist and burrowing into the other's arms like a spoiled child. The other disciples were absolutely flabbergasted, with someone even holding their chopsticks upside down, all eyes staring unblinkingly at their corner. Chuaning, ... The scene was extremely awkward for a moment. Yu Heng Elder could neither stand nor sit, locked stiffly in place by the way Shui Meng was clinging on him. A long while passed in silence before 2 dry, forced chuckles came from Moran's direction. Come on, Shui Meng, still acting so spoiled at your age? He reached out and tried to drag him off. Off now, don't cling to Shizun like that. Shui Meng wasn't acting spoiled on purpose. In fact, if he still remembers this when the alcohol wears off, he'd probably slap himself silly. But he was drunken beyond all sense right now, and Moran had to pry and pull for quite a while before he finally managed to rip him off of Chuaning. Sit, what number is this? Brows knitted, Shui Meng squinted at the single finger Moran held out. 3? Moran, ... Wow, you really are wasted. Shimei laughed and couldn't resist teasing him. Who am I? You're Shimei, duh! Shui Meng rolled his eyes impatiently. Moran joined in. Then who am I? Shui Meng glared at him for a while, then said, a dog. Again, he's not wrong! ... Moran roared, Shui Ziming, I will make you eat those words! Suddenly, from the adjacent table, a Xisheng Peak disciple, who knows if he's just naturally courageous or if alcohol took away all his inhibitions too, pointed at Chuaning and gleefully asked in a high-pitched voice, Hey young master, look over there, who's that? Shui Meng, an authentic lightweight, couldn't even sit up any longer. He slumped over the table, propped his cheek in one hand, and squinted at Chuaning long and hard. Oh no, he's being set up. What is poor Meng gonna say? Chuaning, ... Shui Meng, ... Chuaning, ... Shui Meng, ... Oh, they're having like a back and forth staring contest. The deadlock lasted for a long while, but just when everyone thought that Shui Meng was about to pass out drunk, He suddenly grinned widely and tried to grab Chuanning's sleeve again. Immortal Gugu. The words were clear and unmistakable. All of the disciples. ... Oh, that's so cute! Shuemong is so cute! There was no way to tell who started laughing first, but everyone lost control and joined in. Even if Chuanning's face was gloomy and his fuse was short, they figured that if everyone was in on it, then it's not like he could pull out Tianwen and whip every single person here. And so the lively Mengpo Hall roared with laughter, everyone chiming in over meat and booze, adding to the chaos. Haha, immortal Gugu! Yu Hung Elder is so pretty that he does look like an immortal. If you ask me, I'll have to use a common saying. Every time I see him, I think of it. Someone asked, what saying? Other than the 3 layers of snow on you, who under the skies would be fit to don white? Ugh, you are so uncultured. Chuanning's face went through a roulette of colors before he finally decided to fake composure and pretend not to have heard at all. He was used to being revered by everyone from a distance, but this sudden closeness born of the festive atmosphere and the abundance of wine left him at a complete loss. Faced with such a situation, he really didn't know how to react at all, and could only force himself to fake a calmness that he didn't feel. But the bloom of pink on his ears betrayed the frozen-over expression on his handsome face. Moran noticed. He pressed his lips together and said nothing, but for some reason, a burst of jealousy surged irritatingly through his chest. Possessive? Jealous Moran? I'm all here for that. It's not like he didn't acknowledge Chuanning's good looks, but like everyone else, he knew well that Chuanning's beauty was a sharp kind, like the edge of a blade, and that he was cold as snow and frost when he wasn't smiling, forbidding approach. From his dim and narrow perspective, Chuanning was like a plate of savory, aromatic, crispy meat, but put into a filthy broken box, and he was the only one in the entire world who had opened the box and gone to taste the deliciousness inside. He didn't have to worry about someone else finding out about this delicacy and drooling over it. But tonight, bathed in the warmth of the stove fire and tipsy from the warmed wine, so many pairs of eyes were turned to that box that used to be of no interest to anyone. Moran suddenly felt nervous. He wanted to cover the box and chase away these people, salivating after his food like swatting away annoying flies. Moran really is so dumb, right? He's like, Chuanning is my person. No one else can stare at him. But he's also like, I don't like my Shizun. Nope. I don't like him. Nuh-uh. But when he remembered that in this life the crispy meat didn't belong to him, his hands were full with clear, translucent wontons. He had no time to chase away the wolves salivating after the meat. To the surprise of Moran and the others, Chuanning actually did come prepared with a New Year's show, just like the other elders, a Guqin performance. The disciples were starry-eyed, and someone whispered, "Who would have thought that Yu Hung Elder knew how to play the Guqin? And he's so good at it too! I nearly forgot to taste the meat!" Moran sat there quietly without a word. Shuemong had fallen asleep a while ago, breaths deep and even from where he was sprawled on the table. Moran took the jar of wine by his hand and filled his own cup, drinking from it as he listened while staring at the person on stage, lost in thought. The irritation in his chest grew worse. In the last life, Chuanning didn't play anything at the New Year's Eve feast. Very few people knew the way he looked when playing the Guqin. There was a Guqin made of paulownia wood in the courtyard when he was being kept prisoner by Moran. One day, maybe to vent his frustrations, he had sat by it, closed his eyes, and played a song. The sound of the Guqin drifted through the air, attracting birds and butterflies alike. When Moran returned, the sight that greeted him was that of Chuanning's profile in the courtyard, indescribably lofty and serene. And just how had he treated him back then? Oh right. He had pushed him down and effed him next to the Guqin, violated this man who was clear and cold as the light of the moon right there in the courtyard. Moran cared only about chasing his own pleasure, not even sparing a thought for Chuanning's pain and discomfort, even disregarding the fact that it was already winter, and his Shizun, who couldn't handle the cold, was lying there on the ice-cold cobblestone with his robes torn off, getting effed by him until he really couldn't take it anymore and passed out. What a dumb husky this Moran. Poor Shizun, poor Chuanning. Afterwards, he didn't fully recover even after months of careful tending. And he caught a cold. Really? Chuaning, what do you see in this dumb husky? At that time, Moran had said to him in a chilly voice, Chuaning, from now on, you're forbidden from playing the guqin in front of others. Do you have any idea the way you look when playing is so... He pressed his lips together, but couldn't find the right words, so he didn't finish the sentence. It's so what? It was clearly a serene, dignified look, but for some reason, it was so alluring as to destroy all of his self-control. Chuaning said nothing, lips pale and eyes closed, the set of his eyebrows stern. Moran raised a hand and hesitated for a second, before touching the tightly knitted space between his brows. Ta Xianjun's gestures were almost gentle, but his voice was still cold and ruthless. If you don't listen, this venerable one will chain you to the bed, and then you won't be able to do anything but sleep with this venerable one. Don't think this venerable one won't do it. And just how had Chuaning responded back then? Moran took another sip, watching the person on the stage, and continued his melancholic recollection. He couldn't be sure. Maybe he had said nothing. Or maybe he had opened his eyes and coldly said, "Get the hell out." He couldn't remember clearly anymore. In that life, he had been entangled with Chuaning for so long that many things had become blurred at the edges. Eventually, like a beast, he knew only one thing. Chuaning was his. Even if he didn't like him, he was still under his to sunder and to ruin. He'd rather rip Chuaning apart with his own hands, bite through his ribcage and tear out his organs like a beast, than to allow someone else to touch him. He wanted Chuaning's blood to course with his desire, his bones to bear his curse, and his body to be filled with his passion. Wasn't he always so virtuous and untouchable? And in the end, didn't he still have to open his legs for the world's evilest villain, on the bed of the most ruthless tyrant, to have his life be taken by the man's fiery weapon? Oh my god, I can't believe he called his thing a fiery weapon? Moran, you're so embarrassing, please. He defiled him, made him dirty, inside, outside, everywhere. Shredded clothes weren't so easy to put back on. Moran closed his eyes, knuckles white, heart hammering. Sunken deep into his memories, he could no longer hear the lively merriment of New Year's Eve festivities, or the soothing sounds of Chuaning's guqin. All that remained in his mind was a callous, crazed voice, swooping back from the past and hovering like a vulture. Hell is too cold. Chuaning, I'll take you to the grave with me. That's right. You're God. You're everyone's light. All of them. Shuemeng, Meihan Shui, and all the common people are just waiting for you to shine on them. Chu Zhongshi. How very saintly of you. The voice laughed sweetly, laughed and laughed, until it suddenly became cruel, like a soul split in half, thundering. But what about me? Have you ever shined on me? Ever given me any warmth? All you've ever given me were these scars on my body. How very saintly of you, Chuaning. Your body is mine, and your life too. You want to be their fire? But I'm taking you to the grave with me. I'll make you shine on my dead body and nothing else. I want you to rot with me. Living or dying won't be up to you. Suddenly, there was a loud cheering and applause. Moran's eyes flew open. His back was drenched in a cold sweat. The performance had ended, and all of the disciples were clapping enthusiastically. Sitting in the crowd, Moran felt his vision pulsing and blurring, fading in and out. He watched Chuaning walk slowly down the wooden steps, holding a guqin made of paulownia wood. In that moment, for the very first time in his life, he suddenly felt that it was all so absurd, that his past self must have actually been mad. Chuaning wasn't actually a bad guy. Why was he even doing any of this? He swallowed, feeling the burn of the alcohol down his throat, but feeling no less at a loss, exhausted and confused, until finally he fell into a drunken oblivion. End of chapter. Okay, author's notes. Mini theater. Each actor's inner thoughts. Mo Wei Yu. I feel like a lunatic in my past life. No matter how I look at the script from the director, I'm playing a psycho. This script is unbearable, but I have no choice but to obey. Shuemeng. I feel like I'm a straight man, but the director actually made me cling onto Shizun for attention today. This script is unbearable, but I have no choice but to obey. Shimei. I feel like Aran has changed. The director said the one he likes is me, but today he didn't even look at me. This script is unbearable, but I have no choice but to obey. Chuaning. I feel like I don't want to act bed scenes. But the director said, I don't care what he said. Drag him outside, beat him up. If he dies, I'll take the fall. I'll let him know what it means to have no choice but to obey. Of course, our Chuan-ning would not do anything he doesn't want to do. He'd be like, are you serious? Nope. I'm not gonna listen to the script. I'm gonna do what I want. Anyway, that is the end of chapter 57, right? Yeah, 57. That was the end of chapter 57. And so they're all spending New Year's Eve together. Chuan-ning made really cute round dumpling wontons. And Moran starts having flashbacks, thinking about when Chuan-ning had made him wontons right after Shimei had died, and how he had tossed the wontons onto the floor, and Chuan-ning had a really sad, resigned expression. And then pretty much for the entirety of the chapter, Moran is just contemplating and flashbacking to his first life as Ta Xianjun, how he treated Chuan-ning, and how possessive he was of Chuan-ning. He inadvertently keeps getting jealous seeing other people cling to him. He got mad when Shremeng was cuddling with Chuan-ning, and then he started to get nervous and panicked when other people started looking at Chuan-ning, his beauty and his grace, and calling him Immortal Gaga. And then Chuan-ning went on stage to play a performance, and Moran is like, nobody look at him. He's my meat. No, he's my man. Get away. Look away. But he can't do anything about it because in this life, he is just Chuan-ning's disciple who supposedly hates his guts. So, you know, Moran, you brought this upon yourself. Dumb husky. Anyway, even he realized that, wow, I was really acting psychotic in my first life, right? What was that about, huh? What was I even thinking? Chuan-ning's a pretty good guy. Why did I hate him so much? I mean, like, I lusted after him, but like, the heck? I must have been mad. Yes, Moran. And hopefully, as we continue reading, we will find out why he had all those emotions and why he acted so aggressive and psychotic and possessed, right? We'll find out as we keep reading. But that's all we have for today. Thank you so much for listening, and I will see you guys next time. Bye-bye!